Hello chaps, this is a review, but it's not a standard review. It's not the sort of review you would have seen last week from the Vatia Phono 1 phono amplifier, for example, that has the usual sort of review template. This is not like that. This is an archive review. Oh, and if you want to see that review from the Vatia Phono amplifier, I'll put a link up yonder. No, this is an archive review. If you want to know why that's different, how it's different, and in what way it's different, well, you can look at this link, and if you click that link, you watch, say, 4.5 minutes, it will tell you all about it. Now, let's get on with that review. So this is a review of a turntable. It's a turntable which, I don't know, would they be upset at this? It has a sort of hobbyist look about it, this particular turntable. That's not a bad thing. It's just the aesthetic. It has that look. It's by a company in the UK called Iota. And this particular turntable is called the Prima, and it's not really a turntable which is on the front line of their range anymore. This is more of a legacy item. This is an archive review, so this is a review which was done a little while ago. So this particular turntable, it's not, as I say, being pushed by the company, but you can still buy it. Now, because of that, the prices have changed from my original review. So when I originally reviewed this design, it was priced at £1,295, but you needed to add the cost of an arm to that. That price was for the turntable only. Now, that plinth price has been reduced, and it has been reduced from £1,295 to £1,095, and you're saving £200. Now, if you don't have an arm of your own, you can buy one from Iota, and they have one that's a relatively recent release. I never reviewed this, not so far anyway. It's called the Satori. But you can also send in an arm of your own, and it can be upgraded by Iota to its own standards. £325 is the quoted figure for that. Now, for my review, I used an old Riga arm, an RB220. That one was upgraded by Iota, put on the actual turntable, and I reviewed the whole kit and caboodle. But look, if you don't have your own arm, it's worth calling the company and just having a chat with them. They may have a Riga arm there to sell you. I don't know. They may have one in stock. There may be a little supply which they can provide to you. Talk to the company. This is a small company, which means that they're pretty flexible and they're willing to help you. So if you have issues in terms of grabbing an arm of your own, give them a call. I'm sure they can help you out. They're very nice people. Now, when I unboxed the Prima from its quite elaborate packaging, and you'll see what I mean if you ever buy one yourself, I just spent time having put the whole thing together, which is a meticulous, slow, but straightforward process. It takes time, but it's a fairly straightforward process, and there are no overriding installation issues as long as you follow the instructions. When it was all up and raring to go, before I plugged it in, I just sat there and stared at this thing because it has an interesting look. It's a complex piece of engineering at first glance, and fascinating to explore with the eye, with its girder-like chassis and knobbly wooden balls adorning it, and feet that looks like it was built at Camel Laird and then finished off at Habitat. In fact, the turntable has been created using a combination of beech hardwood, carbon fibre, MDF, stainless steel, acetal, ABS, and die-cast aluminium. And that's quite a list. The Prima actually uses two types of wood, although you probably wouldn't notice at first glance. That's because Iota also uses birch ply, which I forgot to mention. That supports the damped motor, which in turn is strengthened by a cross brace. It's this assembly that is mounted on solid, adjustable for height, beech hardwood feet featuring anti-slip pads. You can see that this is a pretty complex design, and that there's plenty of thought that's been put into this turntable. So that's the broad outline of this turntable. So I think we need to take, before we go any further, a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the Iota Prima turntable. And let's look at a relatively minor part in this whole operation, The belt. The belt used on this design is small and made from silicon nitrile. The sonic benefits the company reports from this belt is balanced by the slightly less robust nature of the material itself and features a little less grip than usual. Hence, a push start to the platter is recommended. I actually never found this element to be an issue, I have to say, and sometimes forgot to push the platter, which on its own worked just fine without my assistance. Oh, and you change the speed by moving the belt across the pulley to a new slot. The armboard can feature regular Rigby type fittings, but other armboards can be bought too for other tone arms and for tone arms of various lengths. To facilitate that, the armboard is mounted on T-slots. The armboards feature the carbon fibre plus birch ply, beech hardwood for damping, and stainless steel spacers and fittings. Sitting along the turntable is an external mains filtered power supply called a MFP1. Now, you can upgrade to a digital synthesis model with a speed control. To support the 24-pole AC synchronous motor, this extruded aluminium power unit uses a multi-stage filtration system, double shielded and star-earthed with a separate fuse protector, with a rocker power switch on the front and IEC power socket and turntable socket on the rear. It's rated at 250 watts. On the platter is a bonded layer of cork and nitrile rubber, a combination I've been recommending for years, so I applaud this design move. The platter bearing consists of a brass sleeve mounted on a acetal outer brush with a polished stainless steel bearing shaft upon a grade 5 silicon nitride ceramic ball. Synthetic oil acts as a lubricant. A sub-platter sits underneath the main platter, and that's constructed from ABS with bonded carbon fibre and polymer damping to boot. The spindle is made from brass. You'll also find a stabilizer that sits atop the spindle, made from CNC machined stainless steel. Carbon fibre sits at the base as a layer contacting the record itself. As for the tone arm, that's a Rigby modded RB220, as I said, and that's been fitted with a QT mod packaging featuring Cardus wire inside, plus a ground wire and upgraded cartridge tags. You also get an upgraded captive cable in a new base with RCA Nutric or XLR plugs. A straight or right-angled SME Gelco type plug can be fitted on request instead. Now let's zip over to the rear of the tone arm and take a look at the quite remarkable SwingWeight, a counterweight that is screwed onto the rear of the arm with an Allen key. The SwingWeight does just that. It freely moves or swings laterally if you give it a push. It features a non-resonant bearing mounted above a stainless steel counterweight routed on an Allen head cap screw. You can move the weight or adjust for tracking force as well. The center core section is made from acetal for damping. Different mass types are available for different arm designs, while I was also supplied with 2 additional screw-on weights to cater for any strange cartridges I might stick on the other end. So what's the idea behind this swinging design? Well, it sits underneath the center line of the arm, and it's there to improve tracking and stability, as well as, quote, low-level detail and overall resolution. I had a chat with the designer Nigel Brown about this, but what I will do, rather than talk about it here, I'll put it in the description and you can find out what his comments are about this particular design. Now, when you look at the turntable as a whole entity, you'll realize there's a broad tweakability element to the turntable with varying power supplies, tone arms and the like. So it's well worth studying the menu of price options before you choose to buy. But before you do choose to buy, what does this turntable actually sound like? Well, let's go to the sound quality tests and we'll find out. To begin the actual sound tests, I decided to choose a slice of prog and camel in this particular instance, an album from 1976 called Moon Madness, and the track, or actually tracks, Aristillus, followed by Song Within a Song. Now, Aristillus features a swathe of synth and organ work as an instrumental, with the band offering occasional impenetrable mutterings as a background sound effect. Part of the track is a complex, high-frequency lead keyboard section, which is a devil for most hi-fi components to tackle because it tests the discipline imposed on this frequency area. Now, to begin the sound quality tests, I left the stabilizer, which the company supplies with this turntable, I left the stabilizer off, just to hear what it sounded like without it. And we'll look at the stabilizer a bit later on in this review. In this form, I was happy to hear a clear, wide and detailed presentation that presented each keyboard-based instrument over a well-ordered soundstage. That high-frequency solo piece was a slight issue for the Prima though, which didn't really surprise me. I've heard turntables at twice the price that have struggled with this area. The high frequencies seem to flap around like a flag in the wind, as if they didn't quite know which way to travel. So I put the stabilizer back on the spindle, and that did seem to calm things rather. It lessened the slight stridency in the upper mids and the treble areas. Adding this stabilizer also solidified the lower mids and the bass area, especially when the rather textured analog synths kicked in. This gave this part of the soundstage a grounded and firm foundation. Finally, during the high frequency solo sequence, there was more information on offer because of the greater focus. Now, the thing about a good piece of hi-fi, no matter what it is, turntable, amplifier, speakers, whatever it might be, if you're listening to music from the 70s or the 60s and you're listening to somebody playing, say, a Hammond organ or an old analog synth, you get a real sense of physical feedback. You can really hear when somebody is pushing down on the keyboard area of these machines. When somebody's playing a Hammond organ, for example, you can hear the keys being pressed, and it's the same with a Mini Moog or whatever it might be. You can hear the travel of the keys. They make a very subtle sound on their own, and the Iota Prima tracked this with the stabilizer on, I might add. There was a better sense of notes starting and stopping as well. So after all of that, I decided for the rest of this review to keep that stabilizer on and in place, and I would recommend the same to you if you ever do buy this turntable. Song Within a Song featured guitar, percussion, voices and the like. It was at this point that I wanted to give you, now the stabilizer issue had been settled, a first impression overview. After you've listened to a new turntable that you're reviewing, after a little while you get an impression of the personality. There's lots of detail to come, sure, and there's lots of analysis to be taken care of, that's correct, but you do get an overall frame of what's going on within this turntable. And at this stage, I could hear the Iota Prima sounded pretty neutral and balanced. Nothing spiked, nothing jumped out. There was no dramatic emphasis in any frequency band. Nothing made me wince. The basics were very good. The highlight, though, was the structure of the soundstage. Have you ever been on holiday, say, and you've been in your hotel room, or you're in a cottage or some chalet or something, and you've opened the curtains because you really don't know what's behind. Maybe you turned up the night before and it was pitch black, and you open the curtains and you see a beautiful landscape and it hits you. And when you're visually impressed, the landscape sort of pulls you in. It sort of takes you and pulls you into that landscape. Even if it's just for a moment, it's basically you being impressed with what you're seeing, but you almost go into that landscape. Well, that's what the Prima did to me when playing music. It was odd. The soundstage almost had a triangular funnel effect that ranged backwards, way beyond the rear of the speakers, to a point hitting the rear of the stereo image. Nevertheless, the sense of transparency and clarity, especially for a turntable of this price point, was excellent. Bass was interesting on the Prima because there was only ever enough to do the job. Frankly, that's what I want from this lower frequency. If I want bass to swamp my head, then I'll visit a nightclub at 2 AM. On this track though, bass was effective, firm, massy and well formed, but it never dominated. It was well behaved. How about mid-range and treble? I found both of those frequencies democratic, which is an odd epithet to use in a review, you might think, but it was strangely apt here. The mids and treble are the busiest parts of any frequency spectrum during any piece of music. Their nuances and subtleties are myriad. Here, each element of the song, from a mid-treble perspective, seemed to have a fair crack of the whip. Hence, normally shy instruments such as, say, the rhythm guitar, well, they were easily heard here. Even the usually absent vibrato on the harmony vocal was right there, and that was a bit of a shocker, I've got to tell you, but it was very welcome. Then I turned to a slice of vocal jazz, and a lady who's not talked about as much as I think she should be talked about, a lady by the name of Ethel Ennis. She was singing a track, He Loves Me, on her album This Is Ethel Ennis on RCA. And again, I was impressed by the layout of the soundstage from this particular song. The brass section being particularly incisive, and around the bass area, the bass saxophones offered a selection of delicious, reedy textures. Ennis's own delivery was smooth, yet provided a host of information in terms of her diction, the amount of effort she applied to certain words, the slight change in consistency of a vibrato as she ran out of breath, and so on. So the performance of this particular song was all the more enjoyable because the Prima inserted so much emotion. So how would I conclude the review of the Iota Prima turntable? Well, I wouldn't get complacent about the performance of the Iota Prima itself. You need isolation under the external power supply, a better cable for the same, and good support shelving. But if you're careful in how you present the Prima, it'll reward you with open, mid-range and treble, and just enough bass to give you a balanced presentation. The structure of the soundstage encourages a naturalistic flow to the music as well. In fact, be warned, the Iota Prima turntable will threaten to caress your ears and glue your bottom to your listening chair as you while away your music listening into the wee small hours. Now, I don't know how many Primas Iota still has left. It must be a limited amount, so if you do fancy one of these, I will get in pretty soon. But it's certainly a fascinating design and well worth a look. And that's all for me from this particular video. Thank you very much for hanging around to the end of this video. Thank you also for your support. And if you haven't done so already, can you do me a favor and click on the like and also subscribe buttons? It would mean the world to me. Thank you very much. Check out the description with a quote from the designer about this turntable. There's also links in there to my Facebook group, which you're welcome to join. Also other social media links. There's also a link to my website, which has a host of information, reviews, news, features, interviews, all kinds of good stuff. I'll put a link for that below too. I'll be back next week with another video, and I hope to have your company around about then. Until that time, bye bye for now.